What's up, people? Hope you're having a wonderful Thursday night. Welcome aboard the Gallant Says podcast on Thursday, January 3rd of 2024. It's live at youtube.com/Paul Gallant or twitch.tv/Gallant Says or x.com/Gallant Says or what else is it on? Facebook.com/Paul Gallant Sports. I think I forgot to create a link for Instagram, but it's on Sports Gallant there. And it's also available after the fact wherever you get your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. GallantSays@gmail.com if you ever have a question. We've got lots of stuff to discuss today. I guess we can get into the disrespect directed at the Houston Texans come Pro Bowl Selection Day. It's called the Pro Bowl games now. I don't want to talk about James Harden and Bill O'Brien, but I do feel obligated to discuss them whenever they find their way back into the news. And I do want to talk about Aaron Rodgers and Jimmy Kimmel, because I believe that there might be unwritten rules for trash talk that have come from it. I want to start, though, talking about Saturday night's big Houston Texans game in Indianapolis, 7-15, with the Texans 1-point favorites against the Colts. For those who don't know, I grew up in Massachusetts, a diehard Patriots fan. They are still my favorite sports team, but I've been in Houston such a long time that I don't really watch them as much as I used to. And if we're being perfectly honest, I probably do care about what the Houston Texans do on a Sunday-to-Sunday basis a little bit more than the Patriots, in particular because, the Patriots suck right now. And I don't think they're going to be good anytime soon. We'll explain how Bill O'Brien might be a part of that a little bit later on in the show. But I know what it is to hate the Indianapolis Colts. As a wee lad, the Colts were in the AFC East, but not for that long, at least when they were good. But when they moved to the AFC South and joined the Texans and began to essentially raid and pillage them on an annual basis, with Peyton Manning under center, they were the Patriots' arch rival of the 2000s. They played in a lot of big games. For the most part, the Patriots won it, but there is no team that I hated more than the Indianapolis Colts. But at the very least, my favorite team, for the most part, has beaten the Indianapolis Colts. So while I hate the Colts and the fact that after losing to the Patriots in the playoffs in 2003, a game where Peyton Manning melted down and threw 4 interceptions, 3 to tie Law, they started whining and complaining, and Bill Polian, who was on the competition committee, had the rules changed, which has led to offenses having essentially nothing to stop them in today's NFL. Oh, my wide receivers can't get off a 5-yard jam. Marvin Harrison, Reggie Wayne, they're getting held every play. And they lost 20-3 the next year to the Patriots in the playoffs. Both of those games I was at, in a game where the Patriots had a bunch of backup corners and Troy Brown, a fucking wide receiver, covering them. Oh, okay. I'm not bitter about it at all, but the Colts got the rules changed because the Patriots bullied them so much. But the Patriots bullied them, and the Colts bullied the Houston Texans. I took a look at the history of this rivalry, and good God, it's bad. I remember it was bad when I was here before my little 2-year soiree in Seattle, but I didn't know it was this bad until I looked at the numbers today. The all-time series, the Colts lead at 33-10. Fuck! Of course, the one playoff matchup that they played each other in, 2019, was still working at 6-10 back then. They lost to the Colts in the playoffs, 21-7. The Texans have only swept the Colts once. That was in 2016, and it took an overtime game, the game at NRG Stadium, for the Texans to win that. It has been very one-sided. Shit, in the 2000s, the Colts were 15-1 against the Texans. Bad. So hopefully Saturday night, a playoff do-or-die game will help the Texans get a little bit closer in the overall series. We're all right against them in the 2010s. It was a 13-8. The Colts still had the upper hand, though. So earlier this year, we watched the Colts and the Texans, and the Colts won rather decisively, 31-20. The scores that the Texans got late. Some would argue they were in garbage time. I honestly was impressed, though, by those garbage time numbers, statistics, because I thought C.J. Stroud played pretty well at the end of that game. That was one of those first games where you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, maybe there's something here with C.J. Stroud. I don't think you were believing he would turn into the guy that he's turned into. That didn't really happen until that game against the Jacksonville Jaguars the very next week, where they just absolutely destroyed him. And then after that, all of a sudden, looking at C.J. Stroud, I'm like, oh, maybe they got the best quarterback in the draft. And clearly they did get the best quarterback in this year's draft. But that game against the Colts, it was a frustrating one. And the thing that I still can't get out of my head is, even though it was just the second game for both of them, I thought that Shane Steichen was a markedly better head coach than DeMeco Ryans in that game. Now, lots of things have changed since then. There's been a lot of games since then. But Shane Steichen was also a first-year head coach in that moment. I hate making predictions, and the spread makes it even trickier. The Texans are 1-point road favorites. I think that's largely due to the fact that the Texans have C.J. Stroud under center, Gardner Minshew's under center for the Indianapolis Colts. Here's the only thing I'll say, because I hate making predictions. It's kind of pointless. And they've been so damn hard to predict this year, the Texans. I expect a different game. But here are all the things that are different for Texans Colts 2024/2023 round 2. I mentioned the experience. You have a full season of experience for C.J. Stroud and other young Texans players. You can make the same argument for the Colts, but it's a little bit different because Anthony Richardson was basically done for the year after those first 2 drives against the Houston Texans. And you're not really looking at anybody on the Indianapolis Colts specifically and talking about the progress they've made from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, at least not off the top of your head, where with the Texans, there are a lot of guys on that front, but specifically C.J. Stroud. And I'd also make the argument for Will Anderson among some of their other younger players, like Derek Stingley in his second season after he came back for missing all of that time. I think that the games that have been played in between this Week 18 matchup and this Week 2 matchup mean the Texans are better this time around and have improved more this time around than I think the Colts have. But again, it's all relative. The Colts did rather resoundingly beat the Houston Texans in that second game of the year. It also means that there's a lot more experience, as I mentioned a little bit before, for DeMeco Ryans, for Bobby Slowick, but also for Shane Steichen. I'm wondering if experience narrowed the gap that we saw from a coaching perspective in Week 2. Other differences from the last time these two teams played to this time. There's no Noah Brown for the Texans, but he didn't play in the first game of this series either. There's no Jonathan Grenard. Grenard did not have any sacks the first time around, but you will have Gardner Minshew starting. You have Jonathan Taylor also playing, because remember, the Colts kind of fucked up that whole situation during the offseason. He's on the team. He's a damn good running back, you'd think. You'd expect. Devin Singletary is now the starting running back for the Texans. Dameon Pierce was the guy that week. He had 15 carries for 31 yards in that game. And you thought to yourself, maybe it's the offensive line, but as we have seen as the season has progressed, Devin Singletary is just a better fit for this Bobby Slowick offense. Tank Dell, who had 7 catches for 72 yards and a touchdown, and had you wondering why you didn't see more of him against the Baltimore Ravens in Week 1 and more of him in this game, had 7 for 72, as I said before. He is not going to be around for this game. But you will have Nico Collins, who had 7 catches for 146 yards and a touchdown. That was really his coming out party. And you will have Robert Woods, who had 6 catches for 74 yards as well. A couple of people joining me on youtube.com/Paul Gallant. Daniel Pena says, "What's up, Paul?" What's up, Daniel? JC Squared says, "Yo, oi!" That's what I'll say in return. The inverse. I think it'll be different in that it won't be one-sided like the last time. But honestly, the Colts playing at home does give me pause before I cockily put my schmenzer on the table and say, yeah, the Texans are going to win this one. Because the 3 worst outings of the year for the Texans came on the road against teams they should have beaten. The Falcons, where they made Desmond Ridder look good. The Panthers, where they gave Carolina their first win of the year. The Jets, where they made Zach Wilson look like the offensive player of the week. And yes, they won on the road against the Titans in a must-win game with Case Keenum under center. And yes, they beat the Jaguars on the road rather convincingly. They haven't been disasters on the road, but their worst moments have come on the road, where at NRG Stadium this year, they're 6-3. More comments. Rick Hagwood says, going to see Hutch catch some too. Xavier Hutchinson, maybe, I don't know. I'm not putting my life on the line or putting money on the table to bet on that. Da Reno says, I'm so ready. I'm ready too. I'm pretty excited for this game. But I'm not going to say the Texans definitively win this like I know a lot of people will. They've just been so tricky to predict this year. And the first game, however long ago it was, still is in the back of my mind. As far as scenarios, this is what can happen by the end of the weekend for the Texans. 3 outcomes as far as their seeding. They can end up with the 4th seed. That would mean they won the AFC South. They can end up with the 6th seed. They can end up with the 7th seed. And depending on that seeding, if they win the AFC South, they'll host the Cleveland Browns. If they end up with the 6th seed, they'll go on the road to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. Or, if they're the 7th seed, they will play the Buffalo Bills, who will have won the AFC East to become the 2 seed. Which is pretty crazy to think, because it was a couple of weeks ago that we were talking about the Bills as a locker room in a crisis and about how Sean McDermott used the hijackers of 9/11 once as some sort of Michael Scott-esque attempt to motivate his players. But here the Bills are red hot over the last couple of weeks. So, as you heard me say before, the Browns, they're locked into the 5 seed. The Chiefs are locked into the 3 seed. So if the Texans are the 4 or the 6, they are definitely playing one of those 2 teams. There's only 3 games that you have to pay attention to as a Texans fan this weekend, and they're all staggered neatly. Obviously, Saturday night, 7:15 in Indy, the Texans on the road against the Colts, 1-point favorites per mybookie.ag. You got Sunday at noon, the Jaguars and Titans. The Jaguars are 3.5-point favorites in that game. And then you got Sunday Night Football, the battle for the AFC East, the Bills at the Dolphins. Bills are 3-point favorites, which is pretty interesting, but the Dolphins have had a rather disastrous last couple of weeks due to a lot of injuries. And on top of that, just due to some weird off-the-field shit, like Tyreek Hill's house caught fire the other day. The Jaguars, meanwhile, 3.5-point favorites on the road in Nashville against the Tennessee Titans. Interesting to note about the Titans, who haven't confirmed whether or not it's going to be Ryan Tannehill under center or Will Levis under center. Tannehill said he wants to win his last game with the Titans. I think he sees the writing is on the wall. Mike Vrabel says that he wants to win his last game. I imagine the Titans are going to give a very honest effort, and the real question is, are the Jaguars going to have Trevor Lawrence back? He's dealing with a shoulder injury, a finger injury. He's been dealing with a concussion as well. Or are they going to have Christian Kirk back, who they activated? They played a very good game against the Carolina Panthers, who stink, with C.J. Beathard, the quarterback. Is that going to happen again? Can they win a game with C.J. Beathard against the Titans? Anyway, those are the 3 games to pay attention to. And I'm going to power rank the 3 possible outcomes for the Houston Texans in terms of what I would like to see happen. If the Texans win the AFC South, which is what I want to see happen, I want to see them play a home playoff game. I would like to see a crowd that is actually mostly Texans fans at NRG Stadium and hyped Texans fans at NRG Stadium knowing that it is a playoff game. So this has nothing to do with the matchups as much as I just want a home playoff game. I'd love that next weekend. They will play the Browns. All that needs to happen, they got to win. The Jaguars have to lose to the Titans. I also think from a matchup perspective that this is favorable to the Texans from this perspective. You played that game without C.J. Stroud. The Browns defense is great. But does the Browns defense know what it's like to go up against C.J. Stroud? I'd also bet that the average Browns fan, a lot of Ohio State fans amongst them, probably do not want to see C.J. Stroud, given that they are very familiar with his work for the Buckeyes. And also, you saw a lot of Joe Flacco and Amari Cooper in the first game. What are the odds Flacco can do that again? He could do it again. Obviously, the Texans have made a lot of pedestrian quarterbacks look great this year, but I think of all the matchup possibilities, going up against a team that, kicked your ass a couple of weeks ago, is actually advantageous for the Texans because of how recent it was, and it was a game where your starting quarterback didn't actually play. Would I outright predict the Texans to win that game? Probably not. Again, I'm just not comfortable picking the Texans to win any game at this point in time. They have been largely unpredictable this season. The next thing I want, and you're going to think I'm crazy for this, but this is the other possibility. Number 2, as far as things that you should be hoping for at the end of this weekend, is for the Texans to be the 6th seed and play the Kansas City Chiefs in Kansas City, which obviously did not go so well the last time the Texans were in the playoffs doing that. We don't need to go over what happened. We all know it was bad. I'm just thankful that I was in Seattle at the time and I did not have to talk about it the next day. Here's why this is possible. If the Texans win against the Colts on Saturday, the Jaguars win against the Titans, which is probably likely if Trevor Lawrence is healthy, and the Dolphins win, which does seem rather unlikely, they'll play the Kansas City Chiefs. And here's the thing. Kansas City is just not playing so well this year. And it's Patrick Mahomes still. It's Travis Kelce. But I think you got to feel pretty good about your cornerbacks, Derek Stingley, Steven Nelson, against whoever they're throwing out at wide receiver, because it's been a mess this year. What is it, Kadarius Toney? Is it Marquez Valdes-Scantling? I feel like the Chiefs' offense is not good enough, at least this year and at this moment right now, to put up a lot of points against you. I do think the Chiefs' defense is a very tough task, but I would rather play the Chiefs or the Browns than the third possible outcome for the Houston Texans this weekend. The Texans face the Bills in Buffalo. Could be cold, could be snowy, or just weird fucking weather. Remember that Patriots-Bills game on Monday Night Football where the weather was shit and no one could pass the football? That stuff happens in Buffalo. This is, I think, the most likely outcome of all the games that the Texans could play in the playoffs, assuming they beat the Colts on Saturday, which is an assumption at this point in time that I'm not like 100% behind. But let's work with me. This is the things that you should be rooting for. They will play the Bills if the Texans win, obviously. The Jaguars win, and the Bills win. And I just think that things are trending towards the Bills going on the road to Miami, where it will probably be mostly Bills fans. The Dolphins are dealing with a lot of injuries. Things haven't gone so well. They did beat the Cowboys, but they've had a couple of ugly losses. That loss that they had to the Titans, that loss that they just had last week to the Ravens. There's just bad vibes around Miami, and if I'm a Dolphins fan, I'm not feeling great about this game on Sunday. So I think the most likely outcome to happen, the one that Texans fans probably should want the least, is that they will play the Bills in Buffalo. I would personally hope that they win the AFC South, obviously, and that they play the Browns. I think if they played the Chiefs, it would be more advantageous to the Texans than the Bills. But those are the three possible outcomes. Obviously, the Texans need to beat the Colts on Saturday to make that happen, and that is by no means something that's a guarantee. Let's take a look at some comments. YouTube.com/Paul Gallant. Christopher Holden says, I like your complete honesty, but win or lose, I'm proud how our team played with our rookie quarterback, but damn, I do want to win. I think it'll be a close game. Yeah, I don't think that you have anything to hang your head over if the Texans lose, unless they get fucking smoked Saturday night. If they get killed, like, okay, well, that just sucks. And that will sting because it's another loss to the Colts, who are 33-10-1 against you in their history. I mean, you've won the season series twice, and one of them was last year in a very controversial one at the end of the year that got you the second overall pick and not the first overall pick. And, of course, the Texans tied the Colts in week 2. And that wouldn't have even been a problem if Lovie Smith realized that Ka'imi Fairbairn can kick field goals that are close to 60 yards towards the end of, I think it was the first half. I don't know why the fuck he didn't kick that field goal. I remember asking Lovie Smith about it after the fact, and it was very clear to me that he had no idea that Ka'imi Fairbairn had the kind of leg that Ka'imi Fairbairn has. Whatever. They were disrespecting him. More comments here. RSam12X says, wow, the Texans are finding a little luck. No, they're going to need a little bit of luck to win the AFC South. More comments here. Toro McJohnson says, the Texans will win the Super Bowl because they are great against good teams. Wouldn't that be nice? He also says, I'm hoping for a glaze fest from Joe Buck and Troy Aikman for CJ Stroud. It will feel kind of legit to have those two guys on the call. I'm a little annoyed that the game's on a Saturday night. So I'm taking away from my drinking time, but I do think you will hear a lot of praise from those two because they've been talking about it, that they have been very impressed by what the Texans have done this year. And I mean, you got to be. All right. So you want to talk about Texans, Colts. I will read your comments, but, there's a lot of haters in the world, right? In 2024, just like in 2023, if someone's naysaying you, I guess that word's controversial now too, they're a hater. And it's interesting because if you're an athlete, or if you're anyone in the world, I understand how you look for motivation in whatever you can find. Because life is often repetitive, and it's hard to motivate yourself. I mean, it's very interesting how at the turn of the year, we all set New Year's resolutions, and we hope that we're going to follow through on them, but we're probably not going to. And I suppose you just keep on kicking the can down the road until the next year. It's hard to motivate yourself. For whatever reason, January 1st and an entirely new year is motivation for some. I'm not hating on it for what it is, but it is what it is. And I don't know, maybe we should just take things a day at a time. Today's the greatest day of your life. Saturday's the biggest game of the season for the Texans. It could be the biggest day of the Texans' lives until the next day. But I'm not going to dump on people for taking motivation wherever they can get it. It just seems like now athletes have such a low threshold for feeling disrespected. Like, it doesn't take much. And maybe it's because they all watched The Last Dance and they want to impersonate Michael Jordan, taking things personally all show long. Great documentary about the 90s Bulls and Michael Jordan, in case you haven't seen it. But it's at its absolute worst in the NBA. I mean, a player doesn't win MVP like Joel Embiid. He's crying over not winning the MVP over Nikola Jokic the 2 years before. And the year that Embiid wins it, Jokic ends up winning the NBA title. We had the disrespect being shown to James Harden and Russell Westbrook and that annoying-ass season where we were strongly arguing for James Harden to win MVP over that of Russell Westbrook. Guys are mad because they're not all-stars. I'm being disrespected. No, the reality is not everybody can win. Not to sound like a boomer, not to get off my lawn, but not everyone can win, especially when it comes to something as subjective as All-Pro Awards, All-Star Games, the MVP conversation, but it's in football too. I remember when I was in Seattle, Russell Wilson, after the 2019 season, before the 2020 season, brought up the fact like, hey, isn't it funny that I've never gotten an MVP vote? And at face value, you're like, yeah, it is pretty crazy until you take a look at all the seasons that he had played to that point and compared the people that actually got MVP votes. We're seeing a degree of feeling disrespected right now with your Houston Texans. And look, they might have been disrespected a little bit. They're 9-7, just one Pro Bowl starter. Just one. Laramie Tunsil. And by the way, it's the Pro Bowl games, and it's in Orlando. How much of an honor really is this? I'm sure you get a bonus or something like that, but like, all these guys want to be honored, but they don't actually want to participate in the actual event itself, which leads to all sorts of alternates making it into the game. So there's a chance some of these Texans players could be announced as alternates and then in the future say that, yeah, I was a Pro Bowler back in 2024. The alternates, C.J. Stroud, a second alternate, Nico Collins, Will Anderson, and Derek Stingley, who are both first alternates, fullback Andrew Beck, Jonathan Grenard, who I think is the fifth alternate, at pass rusher. So a little bit of respect, but some Houston Texans, I think, are viewing it as disrespect. Take Derek Stingley Jr., who posted a picture of, I guess, LeBron James wearing sunglasses and headphones when his Cleveland Cavaliers were down 3-1 to the Golden State Warriors back in, what was that? Was that 2016? He posted that after not getting elected to the Pro Bowl. Derek, you played 9 games. 5 interceptions, great. You played 9 fucking games. And it's not disrespect. I suppose he's not claiming that he's being disrespected here, but the implication is there when you tweet something like that out right after the Pro Bowl gets announced. Is it about him versus Sauce Gardner? Maybe. It might be. I could be sensitive to that. Sauce Gardner's clearly sensitive to that constant conversation that we have had, and one that was very one-sided in favor of Sauce Gardner until Stingley came back from his injury and had all the interceptions that he did in the first couple of games back, especially that awesome one that he had against the Broncos. But also, we got it from Laramie Tunsil. He was on In the Loop on 610 with Landry Locker, my guy, John Lopez, Figgy. And he told them that he thinks it's his time to be an All-Pro, and that he doesn't get enough credit for his run blocking. He is implying that he is being disrespected. And I get that he's frustrated that he hasn't been a first-team All-Pro before. He's finally on a winning team, and he's hoping that this is finally going to be the year that it changes, and maybe it will. But as I said a little bit ago, in sports, everybody can't win. Everybody can't get the awards. And I'll just read a Tom Brady quote that I guess he said at some sort of conference. If you're about yourself, I would love to compete against you. Go play for the other team. The individual awards and the obsession with them, I understand that you get more money from it. You get accolades from it. You're competitive. But there's a certain point, I think, where believing you're being disrespected because you're not being honored as the best in your field, I would just keep it to yourself. Use it as motivation for yourself. It's just all over sports. And I don't think any of the Texans are doing it in an annoying fashion here, but I do think they're doing it, and it's part of a larger, not necessarily problem, just larger theme with sports. And I guess me, a 34-year-old man, I get fucking annoyed by it. Not everybody is being disrespected. People aren't going out of their way to say, fuck you, Derek Stingley. Fuck you, Laramie Tunsil. They're not doing that. It's a tough decision-making process, and I'm sure there's some people that put more effort into giving out those awards or voting for the Pro Bowl than others, but it's not disrespect. Disrespect is something that is done intentionally, right? If you unintentionally disrespect someone, you're probably going to apologize if the person calls you out for it, unless they're unreasonable with the way that they do it, or a Karen, or the male equivalent of a Karen, but disrespect is done intentionally, and no one is trying to fuck over athletes by not giving them the MVP or an all-star nod or a Pro Bowl nod. But a lot of athletes these days seem to think that. YouTube.com/Paul Gallant. You can join on Twitch, twitch.tv/ESPN975. Oh, did my cat get up on the chair? Hi, Aria. What's up, hon? Have any thoughts? What do you think? Is Laramie Tunsil an All-Pro? Is Derek Stingley kind of lame for feeling disrespected for not being put in the Pro Bowl, even though he only played in 9 games? Any predictions? Texans, Colts. Saturday night. Come on. You're my first guest and only guest. Oh, you're just going to leave? Okay. Yeah, okay. Ari the Cat, everybody. YouTube.com/Paul Gallant, Twitch.tv/Gallant Says. Skeeter 2 times says Stingley a clown due to borderline bust. That's fucking dumb. He's not a bust. He's played well since he's come back this year. You can't call somebody a bust if they've played well. You can only call somebody a bust if they've put in no effort at the NFL level and are a washout. Stingley's not that. I'd point to guys who get injured regularly and say that they're generally not busts either. It's a very violent league. Freak shit happens. To call a guy a bust who has clearly shown that he can play at this level is unfair. You're doing it entirely based off of where the guy was drafted. Stingley has played well since coming back. That's not disputable. It's not. And to call him a bust is just fucking dumb. What else do we have here? Half Nielsen on the Twitch, twitch.tv/Gallant Says. What it do, baby? It's Paul Gall. I got a lot of interesting questions, sort of all over the place. Someone says, rub oil on me and slap me in the face. You got to pay me for that. Rick Hagwood says, looks like your cat's about to slap the bleep out of you. No, she would never do that. Tora McJohnson, your cat looks like the cat from that Kevin Spacey cat movie. There's a Kevin Spacey cat movie? Huh. Skeeter 2 times says, next year when he falls back to reality, we shall see. Okay, but you're making an assumption that he's going to fall back to reality. I don't know what reality you're talking about here, dude. All right. So I talked about Tom Brady a little bit ago, and speaking of sports figures that I refuse to let go, and speaking of disrespect, James Harden still seems to believe he is being disrespected. Now, to his credit, the LA Clippers have actually been playing very well recently. They were 8-10 to start the year, and they have won 13 of their last 15 since bringing him aboard. They're 21-12. Harden had this to say after the most recent victory for the Clippers. Quote, obviously, it didn't start off well. It gave people so much to talk about in a negative way. And now those people that was talking, they're nowhere to be found. Like literally nowhere to be found. Now, he's right, and he has played well, and he deserves some credit that he has come into this situation in the middle of the year and actually looked pretty good. Just like he deserved credit for some of his performances in the playoffs with the Sixers last year. Even I can give James Harden from credit from time to time. In the regular season, he has been awesome, especially when he was with the Rockets. I hate his style of play with a burning passion. I think it's dishonorable to be a flop artist, to carry the ball all over the court, to never play defense. I think it's unmanly to flop as well. Call that toxic masculinity all you want. I think you look like a bitch when you flop to the ground and act like you just got shot. I do. Call that toxic masculinity. Call it somebody who likes football more than basketball, which is definitely what it is. But I just think you look like a bitch if you flop. Anyone who does it. In football, when you're flopping for a pass interference call or because someone gave you a little tap on the head as a quarterback, or after the play, a dust up between a couple of linemen that escalates and one of the linemen flops. Just looks fucking pathetic. But hey, these guys are all bigger than me and could kick my ass, right? Right? Yeah, we all know that, but I just think it looks pathetic. Anyway, Harden has had good moments in the regular season. Right now, he is having more good moments in the regular season. But the reason that no one's looking at this and that there are no naysayers outside of maybe Kendrick Perkins on ESPN is because people aren't paying attention to the NBA right now. They're not. The NBA Cup is done. The college football playoff happened this past weekend. National championship is next weekend. No one starts paying attention to the NBA in sincerity until the very end of the regular season. And really after, if we're being honest, the NFL playoffs end. So like leading up to the All-Star break, that's when people start to really focus on the NBA. And I'm talking about those national talking heads and those critics. And of course, they're not going to criticize you right now for a couple of weeks, but this is the criticism that James Harden has received has never been about the regular season. It's never been about that. It's been about the regular playoff disappearances. And in my opinion, his clear deterioration over the course of a playoffs. It always feels like the deeper in the playoffs he goes, the more likely he is to have a couple of games where he looks best case scenario, tired. Worst case scenario, aloof, like he doesn't give a fuck, like he's ready to go to Vegas and hang out and have some fun. Again, who wouldn't have some fun? There are elements of James Harden off the court that I actually respect. Like the guy is a marathon man and has been, despite partying his ass off night after night after night. Still plays well on the court. I respect that element of it. I just don't like the aesthetics of carrying the ball, traveling, flopping, not playing defense, etc. Trying to draw fouls from three-point land by flailing his legs out violently. Oh, but he stepped in my landing space. Your landing space just moved 4 fucking feet. Fuck off. But the reason that this silence is happening is because no one's paying attention to the NBA. And the silence will return if Harden finally has a good postseason. Hell, people will finally give him his flowers and maybe talk about his legacy a little bit differently. But in every single postseason that he's played in, there have been a couple of moments where he has disappeared. And guess what? We're going to hold you to a higher standard if you're a guy who's been an MVP before, especially if you're a guy who's been an MVP before that's quit on not 1, not 2, but 3 NBA teams. 3! We're talking about in like a 2-year span. Rockets, Nets, Sixers. And he wants people to talk about how unselfish he is. And sure, maybe he was a little unselfish last year when he took a pay cut that he wanted everyone to give it credit for so that the Sixers could sign some more people. But at the same time, I mean, you got to do this winning thing in the playoffs. And from that year that he was with the Oklahoma City Thunder and played the Miami Heat in the finals, and LeBron James won his first finals, which is over a decade ago, to now, like every single year, he just craters in the playoffs horribly. Tora McJohnson says, Paul is 4'1", currently in a booster. 5'11 and a half, but my license says I'm 6 feet tall. Christian Valles comments, how do you feel about Jalen Green then? I'm not loving it right now. Not loving it. Brent Dismuke says, Rockets deserved to be quit on when he did. Brooklyn had the whole Kyrie thing, and yet Harden gets the blame for it. But he straight up shit the bed in Philly. Yeah, okay, but he wanted to go to Brooklyn specifically, knowing everything that everybody already knew about Kyrie Irving. Anyone who paid attention to the Boston Celtics, I did, I'm a Celtics fan, knew that Kyrie Irving going to join him is generally not a great idea. I'm sorry. You have a contract with the team and you quit on them? You shouldn't have signed the contract. And the way that he did it with the Rockets deserve to be quit on? Okay, maybe. They did everything that he wanted them to do for years and years and years. And that was foolish because he just basically said, yeah, fuck off. Then he expected to come back this offseason. Fuck off. And I'm glad Ime Udoka basically said that. OG Texans says, CJ Stroud will ball on Saturday. I hope that you are correct. YouTube.com/Paul Gallant, Twitch.tv/Gallant Says if you want to comment live. Also on Twitter or X at Gallant Says, Facebook.com/Paul Gallant Sports. There's another Houston Sports X that I wanted to discuss, at least quickly. I don't know how many of these details are true, especially with all the drama that's been leaking out of New England over the last couple of days. But does this not sound a lot like something that would happen with Bill O'Brien with the Houston Texans? There's a report that came out in the Boston Herald. For those who don't know, it is basically Boston's edition of the New York Post. It is a... it's not like the Boston Globe, which prides itself on journalism. It's more sensationalist. But in this article, there's a really interesting passage about Bill O'Brien, who may be trying to amass power at Bill Belichick's expense as their new offensive coordinator. I'm just going to read a passage. When Kraft pushed for coaching changes, Bob Kraft, owner of the Patriots, it led to the rehiring of ex-Patriots assistant Bill O'Brien. Belichick, according to sources, wanted to keep Matt Patricia, who was the offensive coordinator the year before, and grow together. But Belichick relented, and O'Brien returned as offensive coordinator. According to league sources, over the course of the year, some assistants came to believe that Bill O'Brien wanted to clean house and build his own offensive coaching staff as soon as he arrived there. Belichick wouldn't let him do it. He allowed one hire. That's it. O'Brien has also supposedly pulled the offense closer to him, running more unit meetings, which involve offensive players, than Bill Belichick and Matt Patricia had the year before. Positional meetings became scarce. Most everything flowed through O'Brien. Earlier this week, when asked how he saw his approach to the Patriots coaching staff, again, he's the offensive coordinator, O'Brien said, "That's a little bit of a strength of mine. We were able to come together very quickly. We have a hardworking staff. It hasn't been easy. We've had some things that we've had to deal with over the course of the year, but that's just like that for every staff." Now, the Herald says they could not confirm whether O'Brien wanted to remake the coaching staff, but his frustration with wide receivers and the offensive line coaches and the wide receiver coaches has been an issue since the spring, and he's been getting frustrated with the lack of development. You hear all these things, and you hear a guy who is a control freak, and I don't know if there's ever going to be an article written about how the 2017, not an article, just a fucking book, about the 2017 Houston Texans and what a fucking crazy year that was, with Deshaun Watson as a rookie, the Texans nearly refusing to play in that game against the Seattle Seahawks, which was the same day as Game 5 of the 2017 World Series, after those comments by Bob McNair about inmates running the prison, whatever it was. They were pissed off about it. They almost didn't play that game. And then the end of the year, after Watson tore his ACL and the season fell apart, the power struggle that seemed to be happening between head coach Bill O'Brien and general manager Rick Smith, who had been very long tenured with the Houston Texans. I wonder if a book will ever be written, because there were some interesting strategies employed as far as the actual power struggle goes. But reading all this stuff about O'Brien does make me wonder if he's making a bit of a play in New England. I mean, I guess why not? Why wouldn't you? It's clear that Bob Kraft, the owner of the Patriots, likes him. But as a Patriots fan, that does concern me just a little bit. Just a little bit. That perhaps Bill O'Brien is efforting to make things his way behind the scenes with the Patriots. What do we got here? Skeeter 2 times says, "Keep bashing Harden, you're going to lose your Houston pass." Okay. I need to like Harden? Sorry, I have standards. The person says, "Fuck New England," too. Again, I'm from Boston. I have higher standards for athletes. I just do. I grew up watching the Patriots. I grew up watching the Ubuntu Celtics. If you guys think Harden's on that level, I don't know what to tell you. I kind of feel sorry for you. I don't know how anyone in Houston still likes Harden. I really don't get it. Just a dishonorable player. Not just in not honoring contracts, but also when it comes to just the way he plays. It's disgusting basketball. I get it if you're a young kid or something like that, and that's all you've ever seen, but comparing that to those old tapes of Hakeem Olajuwon, Clyde Drexler, and some of those other Rockets of old, sure, he won MVP, but I just don't understand how anyone enjoyed watching that. I would enjoy playing fantasy basketball with James Harden. I wouldn't want to watch it. And I hated watching it when he was here, which I said often, very often. What else do we have here? YouTube.com/Paul Gallant, Twitch.tv/Gallant Says, 713-780. Just kidding, because we're not on the radio right now. Tormik Johnson, Celtics with them Jim Crow rings. Hey, I mean, they did have Bill Russell. The funny thing is, like, some of the teams that I'm a fan of, they won titles because they were a little bit more progressive than other teams were. For example, let me grab something really quick. No, Ari, you staying in here. So I got this from my brother-in-law for Christmas. If you can't see it, it is a program for the 1960 Cotton Bowl between Texas and Syracuse, where I went to school. Syracuse won the national title that year. Syracuse had integrated. Texas had not. If you've seen the movie The Express with Dennis Quaid, it's been a while since I've seen that. I should probably know that movie off the top of my head a little bit better. You know, it's like a routine movie about like an athlete overcoming adversity, overcoming racism. They're kind of all the same, which is a shame. Like even the one about Jackie Robinson, kind of the same there. But Rob Brown, Dennis Quaid, basically, like, yeah, I guess I'm a fan of a couple of teams that, like the Celtics, Syracuse, who've got some extra championships because they weren't racist. I don't know. I suppose that's good. Right? Does that mean they have to have an asterisk against them? Like, shouldn't the teams that didn't integrate have the asterisk? I don't know. That's just me. What else do we have here? YouTube.com/Paul Gallant, Twitch.tv/Gallant Says. So we've talked about James Harden, Bill O'Brien, Texans and Colts Saturday night. We've talked about the ideal outcomes for the Texans this weekend. Let's talk about, I guess, the biggest scandal in sports media right now. For those who don't know, Aaron Rodgers, now quarterback of the New York Jets, is a guest on the Pat McAfee show on ESPN every single Tuesday. And I got to say, most of his visits this year have been annoying because they've always been Aaron Rodgers, since tearing his Achilles, which was obviously in just the first game of the year, fourth play of the season, has been implying he's going to be back from this torn Achilles a lot. Aaron Rodgers is somebody who loves attention. He also likes trolling. I think he's the athlete version of Elon Musk, which is not to say he's even good at trolling, but he likes to get under people's skin. He likes to rile people up. He likes the attention, but he's somebody who would never admit he likes the attention. He's a lot, I think, like Eddie Vedder in the Pearl Jam song Corduroy. But a lot of people in Seattle would argue that Eddie Vedder did want all the attention. He just pretended he was a tortured artist because it worked for Kurt Cobain, for Nirvana. Anyway, I still fuck with you, Skeeter, 2 times. YouTube.com/Paul Gallant. I want to give a timeline of this back and forth between Aaron Rodgers and Jimmy Kimmel. That has turned into a massive scandal, I guess. Or a talking point for fuckheads like me. Back in February of last year, Jimmy Kimmel called Aaron Rodgers a tinfoil hat for being curious about the contents of the list of people that had been to Jeffrey Epstein's island. If you heard about Jeffrey Epstein's island, you know what the implications are for anyone who went there. If you don't, look it up for yourself. I don't really feel like going down rabbit holes and digging up information I don't want to know about or stuff that could potentially be wrong. But Kimmel called him a tinfoil hat for just being curious about what was on the list. I think everyone was curious about what was on the list. Everyone was curious about how he died. So after that happened, Dave Bakhtiari, a teammate of his with the Green Bay Packers, an offensive lineman, made a joke, not a good one, but it made a joke on Twitter saying that little video from Jimmy Kimmel on the Jimmy Kimmel Show on ABC was Kimmel saying he's on the Epstein list without telling us he's on the Epstein list. Nothing happens. We wait and we wait and we wait and we wait for the Epstein list to be released. And it has been released, I guess. It seems like people are disappointed that there aren't enough sexy names on it. Okay. Again, it's fucked up, whatever was going on there, clearly. But when the list was about to be released on Tuesday, Aaron Rodgers decided, I guess, to call back to David Bakhtiari's quote tweet joke about Jimmy Kimmel on the Pat McAfee show, where he said that I bet Jimmy Kimmel's worried he's going to be on Jeffrey Epstein's list of visitors when it's released. And that led Jimmy Kimmel to threaten to sue Aaron Rodgers for, quote, putting his family in danger, end quote. For those who have listened to me long enough, you know that I get a little bit annoyed when people bring up their family or their mental health when they are put in an uncomfortable situation. They are very, very effective shields, but I don't think that what Aaron Rodgers did there was accuse Jimmy Kimmel of going to Jeffrey Epstein's island to engage in pedophilia. But some people took it as that because this happened on ESPN. And look, I'm not saying that you have to be understanding of Aaron Rodgers, who is very annoying often. Is he always wrong? No. But he's got a lot of takes, and he's a troll. What I'm saying here is that, like, if you know what Aaron Rodgers is, ignore him. Don't engage. Engaging is just going to make him say more and do more. And he's got money, so all right, you want to threaten to sue him. I actually am curious about this. Who has more money between Jimmy Kimmel and Aaron Rodgers? It's probably pretty close, right? One of the best quarterbacks in NFL history. A network late-night talk show host. Huh. Anyway. Pat McAfee is the one who apologized for this whole incident. And he gave a speech, I guess, to lead off yesterday's Pat McAfee show. We're talking about on Wednesday. He says, I could see why Jimmy Kimmel felt the way he did with his position, but I think Aaron was just trying to talk shit. Now, did it go too far in a lot of people's minds? Jimmy Kimmel certainly thought it was the case. McAfee basically apologized for Rodgers. And my takeaway from all of this is not who's right and who's wrong. I'm going to leave it to you to determine who's right and who's wrong. If you know Aaron Rodgers is a troll and you're Jimmy Kimmel, don't give the troll toll. You know, ignore him. But coming away from this, one, I want more trash talk between the two because I like to sit back and eat popcorn and watch two famous people go after each other. I think it's funny. Now, I don't think it's funny to accuse somebody of being a pedophile, but at the same time, I do like seeing these two go back and forth because it provides content for me to discuss. Two, these guys aren't very funny, are they? I think Jimmy Kimmel used to be funny when he was on The Man Show. But he's got writers, and the best joke that he could come up with about Aaron Rodgers being curious about Jeffrey Epstein was that, and his best comeback to Aaron Rodgers was threatening to bring lawyers in to call him, like, A asshole. Spell it like Aaron Rodgers' name. Like, that's the best he could think up. You're rich enough to hire people for zingers. Aaron Rodgers is too. You're using David Bakhtiari's jokes, like recycled jokes, to go after Jimmy. Like, Jesus, like, you can do better than that, right? And the last thing, are there unwritten rules for trash talk? Because I've seen so many people break this down. I agree with McAfee in that I think Rodgers was trying to talk trash, but he was talking trash in the same way that somebody awkwardly does and makes the room entirely quiet. Like two friends are busting balls. One person says, like, I don't know, something innocuous. Like, talking to me. Paul, you dress like a Metro. And my response, if I'm Aaron Rodgers, would be like, Oh, yeah? Well, your wife wants to cheat on you or something. It's like a very big jump in terms of severity. And it's going to make everybody that's sitting around like a little stunned. I doubt anyone's going to laugh at something like that. But it does have me wondering about trash talk as a whole. Is trash talk supposed to always be fun? Because I thought the whole point of trash talk was getting under somebody else's skin. And it's clear that Rodgers, after Kimmel called him a tinfoil hat, was probably going to try to go after Jimmy Kimmel and get under his skin. Well, mission accomplished, and we'll see if he gets sued for it. But it has been interesting to see people look at Aaron Rodgers and what he has said and like take issue with him because they believe that Rodgers was essentially saying that Jimmy Kimmel went to this island and is a pedophile. I don't think that happened. I'm sort of with McAfee in that I think he's just not good at talking shit in a way that people around will enjoy. He's just violent. He's going to nuke a mosquito. And this discourse about like, oh, I can't believe he said this about it. Like that has been tiresome to me, seeing it online. But I am seriously wondering about that. Like, are there unwritten rules for trash talk? Like, if we are with a friend, yeah, there's definitely unwritten rules for that. Like, you don't want to be the person who escalates it too far, who makes it awkward for everybody sitting around, or who starts a fist fight. But if it's somebody you don't know and you're doing it online, it does feel like those rules are sort of out the window. And do you think Aaron Rodgers and Jimmy Kimmel know each other? Probably not. I don't think they want to know each other either. But they clearly don't know each other. And then if the goal of trash talk is to make the other person mad, clearly Aaron Rodgers won, even if he did it in a way that none of us think was really funny. So there you go, guys. That's going to wrap up today's Gallant Says podcast. I appreciate all you jumping aboard. Jackson Cochran says, I feel like Rodgers feeds off of attention. Exactly. A troll is going to be happy when you engage with him. There's no way Jimmy Kimmel can win here, you know? Tormac Johnson says, I was shocked to see your name on the list, Paul. And on that note, I hope you guys have yourselves a wonderful weekend. We'll see what the Houston Texans are able to do tomorrow night. Excuse me. Yeah. Well, if you're listening to this, I'm so bad at closing these out. But we'll see what the Texans are able to do against the Colts in Indianapolis. Hopefully they don't die of just being depressed by the existence of Indianapolis and being stuck there on a Saturday night. That would be very sad. Maybe that's why the Texans have never done so well in Indianapolis. It is kind of a shitty city. Anyway, I appreciate you tuning in. If you haven't already, please press the like button, subscribe on YouTube or on Twitch, or give a follow on Twitter at Gallant Says, or Facebook.com/Paul Gallant Sports if you're one of those people. Instagram at Sports Gallant, but also you can get this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Leave a 5-star review. A review as well. Say something about the show. So long. Farewell. And again, go Texans on Saturday. Have yourselves a wonderful